Welcome back to the SG Weekly Talk Show. Your host here, Mike Callion, with special guest Vitaly. Vitaly is the CEO and owner of Simple Lawns and Landscape Design. Vitaly and I go way back, probably 2-3 years now. Really impressed what he's doing with his lawn care and landscape design company. So I couldn't think of anybody else better to bring on today for today's show to go in and dive and talk about his business journey, multi seven figures, design, build, landscape maintenance, and a whole lot more. But Vitaly, really appreciate you joining. Before we dive into it, people haven't heard about you, starting to make some waves on a national level, at least with the Masterminds group and some other ecosystems that I've seen you out and new at the Landscape Summit. Mind talking, just basically kind of introduce yourself. How'd you get into the green industry? And we'll go from there.
Well, I guess I kind of got born into it. So my dad also has a landscaping company separate from mine. Ever since I've been born, my dad's worked for a landscaping company, and then he started a landscaping company, and then he kind of bred me into it. So I was always working with him over the summers. I learned to hate it at first because it was something that was taken away from my fun. And during summer break, and he pulled me to go work with him, and it was definitely more of a chore than it was something I loved to do. And then as I went through high school, I actually dropped out early because I wanted to go work. School was not my thing at the time, so I had good grades and everything. It just I really wanted to go work. I went to go work for a cabinet company, and then the recession hit us really hard. I got laid off, and then kind of ended up back into the landscaping field. And what really got me into it is I had a car, and my dad found some landscaping company for sale on Craigslist. And he's like, "Hey, let's go take a look at this company." I'm like, I'm just kind of tagging along. I didn't think I was going to be part of this thing. It was just, I thought my dad was just going to bring me along. And he's negotiating a price and stuff like that. And he's like, "Okay, we'll give you Vitaly's car, I have a motorcycle, and then some cash on top, and then we'll make payments to it." And I'm like, "Whoa, like, what's going on? Like, I didn't even sign up for this. What am I going to drive? It was a nice car at the time, and it was worth maybe like 20-30,000. And so that's how I kind of got into the landscaping field. My dad's like, "Well, it's your call. Do you want to buy a business, or do you want to have your car?" And so we ended up buying like one full route of somebody's commercial route. And it was like pretty much their whole company. And that's how I got into it. And then it just started growing that side. Fast forward, I got married. We found another company for sale. We split that company out. Now it's Simple Lawns, which was nothing at the time when we bought it. And I pretty much took over Simple Lawns, and then my dad has his company, and I've been growing Simple Lawns ever since, pretty much. So it's been kind of a weirder journey than a lot of people. A lot of people did it for to pay for their schooling or whatever, but I kind of got brought into it through family, and then bought a company, and then kept on growing it from there.
Dude, that's a crazy story. So full transparency, anybody watching this, I had no idea the background story. I figured it'd be pretty similar to everybody else. But I'd love it. The old man strong-armed you, said, "Listen, you might be buying a business here with your car." Kind of crazy. And I don't I'm sure you heard some of the story, but it had me thinking before you actually had to get rid of your car to buy the business. My background on it was my dad actually did a little landscaping, lawn mowing on the side at a car dealership to pay for our travel hockey. 36-inch Ransom Bobcat mower, probably pretty similar. He's like, "Well, if I'm paying for you and your brother's hockey, you might as well on the Saturdays or Sundays when I'm cutting the dealership and weeding the landscape beds, I'll cut the grass, you can go weed the beds." So I kind of got dragged into it the same thing, but it was interesting. It taught that work ethic and responsibility. And then he had basically retired that mower down. He had stopped pretty much paying for the hockey, but the mower was sitting in the garage. And I was about 15, maybe 16, and wanted the car that your dad forced you to give away, it sounds like. So I was like, "Well, shit, I better go out and make some money," because he's like, "If you want a car, you got to go out and pay for it." So I I
Yeah.
took the mower and started knocking doors. But I mean, that's a wild story. But that's awesome. Like
Yeah, it's different. It's not orthodox to a lot of people, but it was definitely my journey. And when I started my company, Simple Lawns, or when we bought it out and we split our ways, I was 21, and man, I had no idea what I was doing. And my dad, the way my dad runs his company works for him, but it's very old school, referrals only, all this money in a hat, take money in, tuck money out, it's just not, he's always been, well off as far as financially goes wise with this company, but it just worked for him, but it was not something that worked for 95% of the people out there.
Yeah, well, honestly, man, big shout out to your dad. A lot of respect for him doing that because obviously that shaped you and molded you, I think, into the individual I know now. And if it wasn't for that move, who knows? But I mean, I think it was very
Oh
similar.
yeah.
Father said, "Hey, like you need to learn something. Here's a shot at it. You got to get some skin in the game." And that,
Hmm.
from knowing you the time I've known you the last few years, is really, I'm assuming, it's probably been pretty instrumental in your path and in your
Oh yeah.
career. And diving into that, I know we did a deep dive together, but a lot of times we've been hanging out now really in the masterminds group. And throughout the last 24 months and change, really getting to see in person and seeing your team, not just on a screen share, but physically in person. Uh, from the deep dive itself, or watching you remotely in there with that leadership team and see how that's grown and changed. What has been your approach to really create that leadership team? Because obviously you're still a young guy. You've really
Hmm.
surrounded yourself with a bunch of A players. And I
Yeah.
think that most people, to your credit, do not even think about doing that till they're well beyond your age and probably closer to my
Hmm.
age. If you ever think about it, as being a young entrepreneur, just absolutely going out and crushing it. What was the thought in your mind? Like, hey, I need a leadership team. And then the process of building that team. Cause I mean, there's been several people that have come through the live events that I've got to meet on your team personally. And they're A players. So you got to be doing something
Hmm.
over there, some secret sauce.
Yeah, my big thing is I always wanted a larger company. It was always my goal is, my accomplishment is like building an empire. So that was it was something I needed to do early, and it's something that I needed to, I didn't finish school, I didn't finish college, so you know, I guess I'm not the most educated, you can say, but
Well, the
as
good
far
news is
as,
I got 5 years
building
of
a
college under
team.
my belt, and none of that college taught me anything about running any of this. So I won't tell you what I did
Yeah.
in my finance class to actually get through past the grades. But trust me, I think you're fine just the way you are going at this. And I would say a lot of people don't have that education. So I didn't mean to cut
Yeah.
you off, but I want to put some perspective. And
No, for
honestly,
sure.
that diving in the way you did, it is probably, in my opinion, I think the school route is probably not the way that people are going to grow a business fast. You've
Hmm.
gained 4 or 5 years on the rest of us. In that,
Yeah.
you're learning through the school of hard knocks and buying an education industry specifics. I think you're on to something here.
Yeah, and as far as like going back to education side, it's not like I'm not learning. I'm always learning. I'm always reading books now. Like when I was a kid or even through high school, like I would never read ever. So like I've read more books in a year than I've read in my whole life. And that's something that's helped me a lot here recently. Building a good team, building a culture, and even with you guys, like I think that was the biggest thing for me is like is not hiring for experience, but hiring for culture. And I think that's how I built such a good team. And like I have some people that walk in here and they'll talk to our team and stuff like that, and they're like, man, like how do you have like such a good flow of people in here? Like if I ever quit my job or if I ever close down my company, he's like, this is like somewhere where I would want to work. And it wasn't like overnight that it took me to create that. Obviously, it was definitely some time and weeding through different types of people. And now I feel like our culture is so strong, like, and everyone gets along so well that it's contagious as far as like growth wise, ambition, and all that stuff. And I would not be able to do anything without the team.
Yeah, and you can see that just through when we work through some of the financials and the estimating. A lot of teams will literally be on the call or in the room in person because they have to be there. Like your
Hmm.
team was different. They were engaged. They wanted the betterment of the company. And diving into that, I think a lot of people right now that we're talking to, especially in the lawn care industry, landscape industry, there's a labor shortage. There's nobody out there that wants to work. What would, I guess, what's your thoughts on that? Because it feels like you've built such a culture that it's actually a magnet to attract this talent.
Hmm.
Is that the same view? Do you think that the labor market is just disgusting and you can't find anybody, or are you seeing something a little bit different in the way you've approached it?
So, what really changed for us? We had labor issues, 4 or 5 years ago, I guess during COVID, and we were having labor issues because we didn't fix ourselves first. I think it was more of an internal culture issue than it was a labor issue because we were having such a turnaround of employees. We'd have employees come in, they'd work for 3, 4 months, and then be like, they'd quit, no call, no show, and trying to give them a call, they're not picking up. They come in, pick up a check, like, hey, what happened, Jose? And they're like, oh, this guy gave me $1 more. Like, why don't you just come and ask me? It's like something so silly. And then you're always thinking that people are quitting because it's for more money, but it was really because our culture sucked. We had a bad team. We had nobody that was appreciative of them. Nobody was taking care of each other. And once we started focusing on those things and really putting emphasis on making sure we have our core values, we have all that stuff. We have what's it called, a good leadership team that cares about our employees. We only lose the employees we're okay with losing. Guys that were like, on the edge of like not being here anymore, we were like, okay, if they mess up one more time, we're probably gonna let them go. And they come in, they're like, hey, I quit. Well, no problem. You can go, because we were planning on firing you anyways. But as far as like the last couple of years, we did not lose one employee that we did not want to lose. And that's like a huge testament of just how much of a difference culture makes in a company. And, that's something that is really, really big for us, and granted, it wasn't overnight that it happened. It takes some time, but if you really work on it, you really start seeing those results and the fruits of the labor.
Yeah, and you can see that just with your current leadership team. I think one of the things that was an eye opener to me, and I know you were in Merritt Island, Florida, with us 2 weeks ago
Hmm.
at Bluebell, one of the shop tours we did with the masterminds. But Peter Black, there, the owner of Bluebell Landscape, they're part of now the KeyServe company or acquisition company there. Peter
Hmm.
Black there, I think, had about 67 team members. There's some videos and pictures on the Facebook page if people want to check it out. But like something was interesting at Peter's when we rolled up, they were doing their morning shop huddle, and Peter started to talk about that his retention out of like 65 or 67 guys, like 98% of the guys and girls in that company had been with him 10 or more years. So very similar
Yeah,
to
that's super
like,
cool.
you're not seeing that turnover. And working with Peter in a deep dive and some of the key serve thing, from what I understood, it wasn't always like that, but basically he got really true to what you're saying, that culture, the core values. He
Yep.
started hiring, training, and eventually coaching up or coaching out, or really firing to those core values. And as you alluded to it, sometimes if there's not that alignment when that culture is so strong, that those people like be repelled away, they'll almost quit before you end up having to let them go. So I think
Hmm.
that's something key that you hit on there. And I want to touch on that if people are watching this, because I hear, and I don't think it's an excuse because it's really an issue that people are facing. There's no one out to hire, but it's really not that there's no one else to hire. You're just not attracting the right people and you're not able to
Yeah.
retain them on that. And I was just talking to my buddy, Kyle Van Putty. He owns Van Putty Gardens up here in upstate New York and Rochester, multi-million-dollar landscape garden company.
Hmm.
And I was thanking him in the early days. I would jump on the truck and almost start some of the culture and chaos issues. So if I had no call, no show employee, or backed up with rain like we have in upstate New York for the last few weeks, I would jump in and try to get on the truck instead of actually doing what I should be doing to actually grow the culture, build the bench, and actually run the strategy and the systems. And I'm curious, and if that's not the case, it's okay. But did you find like in the early days that you were sucked into the same issues that I were in the early days? Like if we had these issues, I was always the first one in to go in and save these guys. And do you see
Yeah.
that if that was the case, was there any correlation to maybe that's where things were a little bit bumpy. Like you weren't
Yeah,
focused on what you should be.
I think my focus in the early years was about how to get better quality service, how to get better as far as like knowing landscaping better, how to get the best looking grass, how to get, the best looking pavers, how to have the best cuts for the pavers. And that was like my main focus is how to get these things better. And then it wasn't like where it is now is how do I build the best team around me? How do I build culture? How do I and like my whole like mind shifted on how to actually build a company because before it was all like how to be the best company is you're the best at it. And that's not true. You could be the best company out there, but you can't build a team around you and you can't grow a company because nobody can rely on you, but you got to be able to build a team. And that's kind of at the end of the day, if you don't build a team. And that the big thing for me was I would micromanage like crazy in the early days. Like, okay, they don't know what they're doing. You would overhear like, hey, we're gonna do this and this and this, and you'd be like, oh wait, and you come in and you interrupt and be like, this is what you should do instead. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a good idea. Which in turn, now that takes away all responsibility off of them. And now every single decision they're gonna make is gonna be asked by you now. And so now you're having all your employees, if you can't have them make their own decisions, you're making decisions for them. Now they're all relying on you to make that decision for them. So you're not empowering your own employees to do mistakes even, but be able to make their own decisions. So if you really encourage your guys to make their own mistakes and also make their own decisions, you're gonna work yourself to death. And you see that with a lot of smaller companies.
Yeah, and I love that mindset shift that you're talking about there. And I know, like, as we look at it, some of that elite methodology, really the leader is setting that strategy. We're building the team. So that's kind of where you shifted when that shift happened, well before you met us. But obviously, you're building that team and driving into that. That third part is really delivering results, having the metrics and the things that we need to be looking at to be successful. I'm curious, as you've made this transition, so obviously you've set the strategy, the vision where you guys are going. You're getting really good at building that leadership team and the external team on the ground and allowing them to have ownership. As you guys started to develop and as you're starting to continue to work these muscles, because I don't think this is the part that we ever get perfect. We continue to develop it. What are some of the analytics you're looking at? I know you're doing in the company, you're doing design, build, construction, you're doing some maintenance. Are there certain key metrics of the way you look at each one of those division that started to evolve this company? And, ballpark, Vitaly, what are you looking at as far as like crews? How many crews on the road are you running? Just so people get the size of a ballpark of the size of the company.
We have 4 construction crews in-house, and then we sub out 3 construction crews, and that's our first year we started subbing out. And I'll go a little bit in detail because for us, it becomes a big issue during the wintertime when we're not able to sell for 7 full-time construction crews. So we got a sub for that reason, because during the wintertime, it's a lot easier telling a sub, hey, we don't have that much work for you, versus telling our employees, hey, you're laid off, or hey, you're fired for not performing as well, because we don't have as much work for you guys anymore. Either or, we're trying to like not have all that leverage of just having a bunch of employees and trying to carry them through the winter. And as far as maintenance crews, we have 4 maintenance crews. We have an irrigation technician as well, and then also an enhancement crew. So it does bark dusting, cleanups, and stuff like that.
So ballpark somewhere 13, 14 crews, including subs. So pretty good sized company. So I'm assuming there's got to be some numbers you're looking at in that design build. Maybe we tackle that first, if that's cool. Yeah. And what numbers are you looking at? Obviously on the internal crews, and then is there certain metrics with those subcontractors? And I love that approach to the subcontractors. I don't think I've heard many people talk about subcontracting additional work just so they can cover the slower times in the winter seasons. And obviously you're not snow plowing where you're at, but you're some downtime.
Yeah, it doesn't get as slow here as it does in different places, but like we've experienced it for the past couple of years. During COVID, it was fine. We were super busy through the winter, but the last couple of years, like once it hits November, we just see this huge drop off in people wanting to do work. So it just kind of gives us a little bit more flexibility and not having to downsize our company or still have truck payments and insurance and all that stuff, all that overhead expense to just hold these employees over the winter. But as far as metrics, that's one big thing that made us a lot better is job costing for all of our construction projects. Before it was kind of like we wouldn't know if we're making money or not making money until the end of the project. Now we have everyday updating projects, budgeted hours, material costs, how many machines are we using on the project, and we do multiple overhead recovery, so we charge for all our machines, all our trucks, all our dump trailers. So we add all of that in. So during the job, let's say it's a month-long project or a couple week-long project, we're keeping the crew leader updated as far as where they're at on the project, how many budgeted hours they have left. And also we just switched everything over to P4P for our construction divisions, which I know there's almost no companies that are doing that at all for construction side. It's not easy as far as paperwork wise and figuring out, but it's easier for us because we are so good about keeping track of our numbers.
Yeah, that's wild. I'm sure the guys now are being held accountable. And I think like one of the things we talk a lot about in the masterminds and some of these Facebook lives is really like, what does it look like for that construction crew to win? Do they just survive the 8 to 10 hour day and they get done and hopefully they finish enough work to get done on time? There's really no transparency for most companies. They're just going in, doing the work. And at the end of a 30 or 60 or 90 day job, they're like, well, hell, I hope we made some money.
Yeah.
Did we overuse the product or not? So nobody's tracking this stuff. So if you're watching this, Vitaly's gotten really, really serious about this and dialed in. And this is part of the reason why I wanted to bring him on this live, because the things you do in Vitaly are really impressive from the outside, that you're really getting analytical, you're running it with non-emotion. And the fact that you're bringing in these individuals and letting them have ownership of those jobs on a daily basis with clarity, like you said, is unheard of. But I'm assuming that's got to be the security and the ability to implement a P4P or piece rate system, but really to get the crew leaders and the team members to buy into it. Because if there wasn't that clarity going through this, they wouldn't want to do it. They'd probably have a mass exodus.
Yeah, it was definitely hard in the beginning to switch everyone over to P4P, having the guys buy into it, because it's whenever you mess with anyone's salaries, it's always very, very personal. And I understand that. But we had guys that were making, $28 an hour that are now averaging at $46 an hour.
Yeah, that's crazy. So that's a doubling. So Jim Houston, the consultant that was at the last live event you're at, was saying an 18 to 20% average of pay increase with a P4P system. So, I mean, your guys are 8 players, so they're probably dialed in, and they've literally almost doubled their pay. Some of them. That's incredible.
Yeah, some of them, granted, it sucks, but we had some employees that were with us for 8 years that didn't buy into the system and were trying to sabotage the system, that we had to fire because of it. But it's definitely, it's a weird feeling, because you see so much money come out on your what's called paychecks. So your mental thing is like, why is our payroll high? And that's like, your thing is like, oh man, we're probably really low on cash and cash flow is not there. And then you look at your bank account and you're like, we're actually doing the best we've ever done before.
It's a weird feeling, right? I remember
it's really weird.
Early 2000s, we instituted, I think it was 2003, maybe 2004. We implemented, at that point, it was called Piece Rate. Same thing, P4P, but it was the same thing. Like, I was like, holy crap, look at the amount of money coming out on Fridays paychecks. But then I look back at the bank account, I'm like, this is most operating cash we've ever had in the bank.
Yeah.
And then 4 weeks later, we were at an extra $1,200 to $1,300 on a maintenance crew per week without changing a guy or piece of equipment. And the unfortunate thing, but I guess maybe fortunate thing, is there is going to be this casualty. One of our coaches in the masterminds group, dubbed himself the Hatchet Man, because we'd come to these live events and you knew in the back of your mind, like, oh yeah, Joe's probably not going to make it here. I knew he was bad, but now that I'm looking at this, we got to let him go. But I think the interesting thing is when you those guys left, you had to let them go, at least in my instance. You were actually doing them a disservice keeping them there, because they were keeping a pulse to 40 hours a week just to get the OT. They weren't happy, but really what it was is you got a B or C player that's literally hijacking your A players, and you're creating that turmoil, the culture. At least we saw, and it started to create like a toxic environment for these guys and girls that were really good, and eventually they would just leave, and it was crazy.
Yeah, and as far as maintenance, we did the same thing, P for P. It makes it a lot easier that you don't have to be as worried about your numbers. Guys working extra hours. I know Aaron was telling me, he's like, why don't you switch over to P for P? And I'm like, well, I'm scared about quality. And I'm like, okay, well, what are your issues right now? And I'm like, working too much overtime and quality. He's like, so we're both, quality is still your issue regardless. So why don't you switch over to P for P and just worry about the quality? You don't have to worry about guys working too much overtime or taking too many breaks, or, it's one less thing you have to worry about. Of course, you have to do a little bit more paperwork and all that kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, it empowers your employees to make more money. And the employees that are not A players are not going to like it, and they just make room for other A players to fill in. So that was definitely a big thing for me. Another metric that we look at, I don't know if you had a follow-up question, but
No, you're good. I'm loving this. I mean, this is between the design, build, and the maintenance. Couldn't agree with you more. Like, if quality is your concern and OT is, or, and the whole idea of P for P is not to get away from overtime. Legally, we still need to pay it depending on the state. Of course, yeah. You should be making more than the time and a half anyways. And obviously with the design build numbers you give, so they're making way more than that. Sure. No, go ahead. This is perfect. Cause a lot of people are hesitant to do it just on the maintenance end, but basically you're the forerunner of most people that I've seen in construction as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I tried getting any kind of information from other landscaping companies, and I didn't hear anything back from any construction companies that are doing P for P. Cause there's a lot of things that make it confusing. What happens when your crew leader gets sick? What happens if you need to bring on an extra guy for a day? What happens if the guy's helper gets sick? There's a lot of these, variables that make it confusing, and we just kind of found ways to get around that and make it work. And it's something that's still kind of in the trial period, but it's been working well. We've been profitable. The guys been making extra money. Some guys not as much as we would hoped, but our goal is, obviously, my goal is to have our crews making $100,000 a year.
That's awesome.
That's my goal for them.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. And I guess one of the other main reasons why I talked to Andrea, my assistant, who runs the coaching division, is, we got to get Vitaly on here. And I think one of the things I said directly is, like, I've been so impressed at the live events when you're at the masterminds group, that you're not running out of the room and answering your phone. You're focused on there. It seems, at least at face value, the business can run without you for extended periods of time. You got that great leadership team, but before you spent 3 or 4 days with us, you had been in another part of Florida for at least a week or so with the family. You've got a growing family. You've got what now, two kids and one on the way. Is that correct?
3 and 1 on the way.
Yeah, congrats. I saw the Facebook picture when you were doing the gender announcement and all that. And I was like, this guy's got it together. He's got a growing family. He's got a growing business with, 13, 14 crews. But you were literally able to take a cell phone / business trip free, to an extent, vacation or trip. And a lot of times I feel like that's the make or break when we do some of these events. We'll have newer people that will come in, they go through the screening process. But they may be running out of the room 2 to 3 times an hour to fight a fire in that, and 99% of the people in the room now in the mastermind group are not like that, just like yourself. Because candidly, we'll literally say, hey, this may not be a good fit for you. You probably should need some one-on-one coaching, get some firefighting skills before we do this, to delegate this. But from day one, like, you got in that room and you weren't distracted. So really, what does that look like if somebody's watching this and saying, I need to start building the right team. I need to get clear on the culture. I need to really stop micromanaging these guys. But when you build out a team of, 12 to 14 crews with subs, what does a week in the life look like at Vitaly? And if you would give us some insight, what does it look like when you're on the road? Maybe I missed the chaos, but I don't think I did.
Yeah. Well, I didn't get any phone calls, so every once in a while, just a text here and there, but it was not anything like a fire that I needed to put out. It was just more like, filling me in on something, or if it's a group chat between our managers. But like as far as like where I'm stressing out or anything out on vacation, like usually if it gets up to my level, then it becomes a very severe issue. But usually those issues get resolved before they even come up to me. My main thing is, even when I was building my team, is I was not firing or not hiring guys for experience. Every single one of my people in my leadership team had zero landscaping experience when I hired them. They had no landscaping experience. They had experience managing somewhere else, or they were working somewhat in the same field that was relatable. But as far as like having direct landscaping experience, none of them had any direct landscaping experience. And all of them are younger and ambitious, and because I've had, not to be mean, but some older people that came in as an office manager, and they don't even know how to use a computer properly. And it's like, like, what were you doing as an office manager for 15, 20 years? It's like every task takes you 5 hours. And so for me, I really, really take my time on making sure I hire the right people as far as culture. That was a big thing. And then just train them up, and and let them make their own mistakes. It sucks. Don't overreact with mistakes. That's something I get complimented on a lot. We had a door that was ripped off one of our trucks. A guy opened the door, the guy was pulling out, and the mechanic that we had here, he started not too long ago. He's like, I've never seen somebody more composed than you, coming out and looking at this door that was ripped off and kind of just figuring out solutions, instead of, blowing off your cap and cussing out the employee. And like, what is that going to prove? Like, are they not going to want to make a mistake next time? Regardless, they're not going to want to make a mistake. Now they're going to be scared to make a mistake, and they're probably going to be more prone to making a mistake, just because they're so scared to not to make any mistakes anymore, or they're just going to try to hide it from you. There's different ways of leadership. I don't think, cussing out your employees and, blowing a cap is gonna teach them to be a great leader.
Yeah, wise beyond your years. I mean, in the early days, I definitely lost my cool a few times. And that was the worst thing you could do. So yeah, and I'm sure you're looking at the same thing. I mean, we've lost on some of the live events before we knew. We lost $50,000 on a live event. Did I get upset? No, it was an investment in the training of that individual to continue that position and actually drive that in. And I think that you nailed it. Like that's part of that cultural difference, where if you're having labor issues and you can't find anybody, all problems are leadership problems. It probably goes back to the leader. And I think since you've evolved, you've done the self-education, you're self-aware. I think that's part of the reason why you've got such a great culture there. I mean, I'll shamelessly admit, the first time I had the cell phone verification, I looked at my wife and I said, I don't know if I can do this or not, but we got to see if they can sink or swim. So I took my cell phone, and we were at the Hard Rock Casino, I think in Dominican. I stuck it in the lockbox in the hotel, and I had her put the code in so I couldn't open it. 7 days later, came out, and I looked, but to my amazement, there was like maybe 2 messages, and one of them was like my mom forgetting I was on vacation. So I had given everybody her cell phone, like if it hits the wall, like call her. But it's interesting because you mentioned it earlier, like we are so prone to go in and micromanage and like potentially slap them on the wrist, if we're not self-aware, if they did something wrong. But, most people, if you got the right people, will do the right thing or attempt to do the right thing. And they don't necessarily need you like micromanaging them. So I think that I think that's probably been a real key to what you're doing and the culture you've built. So I want to like obviously give you some kudos because that's really fun to watch in a younger guy coming up. And I know you've got a crazy compressed schedule, so I want to be respectful to that. Before I do let you go though, two questions. First one, Masterminds Group, obviously, 7-figure plus businesses. You've been around for about 24 months in the group. Love having you in there. But I know there's been a lot of takeaways that I think people aren't exposed to the things we're teaching. We call it the elite methodology, really very similar to on EOS. If people have heard of that, it's just a little more flexible. But what would be the top 2 or 3 things that you've taken and executed out of there? Because you're not one to just sit there and absorb the material and not go back to the office and actually institute it. And you brought now team members to help institute it. But if people are watching this, even if they're not working with us, like what are the 2 to 3 things that you've taken or learned from that, or even outside of that, that would just be a game changer? Like, how do I get from a 7-figure business that's just broken, or maybe I'm 2 to 3 million, but I got just chaos. How do I conquer the chaos with a couple, 2 or 3 things that you've used?
Yeah, well, building out core values, vision, all that stuff is a big deal. I kind of like when I heard about it first, I'm like, I don't know if this is really going to make a big deal or anything like that. I really didn't think it was going to make a big deal. And
I said the same thing. I laughed at it. I spent 25 grand when we did it in Phoenix. I'm like, is this all foo-foo stuff going to work in a lawn care company? I don't know, but I spent the money, so we better try it. So that's the common reaction. So, that's normal.
Yeah, and we just went all in. We tried it. We actually embraced it. We're living and breathing it. I come out and do meetings with the guys, be like, hey, without looking at the board, what's our 5 core values? And if they name it, here's $20 for lunch, and so like it gets them thinking like I should memorize this. What's our vision? And see if they can memorize it word by word. And all that kind of stuff. It's a big deal because as far as a vision for the company, I always have a vision in my head, but my employees didn't know what I was thinking, and so I made that clear. You don't have to go telling them, "Hey, I want to make 20% net profit." Like my management level knows that, but as far as like guys out in the field, they don't really care about net profits or anything like that. But what I tell them is like, I want to, by next year, we want to have this many maintenance trucks, this many construction trucks. We want to get 2 more dump trailers. We want to get 3 more ditch witches. And so their thinking is like, okay, if I refer my friend over here, and let's say Vitaly wants to keep his company stagnant, my friend's going to boot me out because I know my friend's a better employee than I am, or something along those lines. Or let's say, for instance, for them, it's like, okay, is this a dead end job for me, or is there a future at this company? What is Vitaly thinking? What is his 5-year plan? Like, am I gonna stay being a maintenance crew leader my whole life, or I know that Vitaly's growing the company where there's going to be management levels, there's going to be field manager levels and positions that are going to open up for me. And so that was a really big thing. The big 3 was a really big thing for me. We incorporated it into the management team level mostly because it's something we just started about 6 months ago. And it's definitely helped a lot as far as keeping people accountable for their jobs. And it's not as hard being like, hey, are you working? Oh, yeah, I'm working. Well, like, now it's like, hey, are your big 3s, like, how are you doing with your big 3s? And now they actually have measurables that you can go off of. So
those big 3s are they're game changers. Everybody watching this that has no idea what a big 3 is. Imagine in your company, myself or Vitaly in our job, we can only pull 3 levers. What are the 3 levers that are going to move the needle to the quarterly annual goals, or Vitaly's BHAG, that big, hairy, audacious goal? I mean, the man's going to, well, he's about the size of Everest to begin with, but he's going to climb Everest with the team. So it helps that clarity, man. And that's definitely the reason I wanted you on here, because you really are getting really tactful in executing these things. So that's huge. Anything else that like was a game changer, whether it was from the Masterminds group or something through your journey the last, X amount of years that you'd say, what's the last final thing that if you're going to do 3 things that you'd be looking at or executing?
My biggest thing, like just lately, is just reading books and educating yourself how to build a great team. That's something that really helped me, get to where we're at, because we kind of became really stagnant around that $2 million mark. And I didn't really think I needed to start reading business books and all that kind of stuff. And that, and also join Simple Growth. That really got me, to 3 million or 3.3 million last year. And I think I'm almost positive we're going to hit 5 million this year. That really got me thinking differently, thinking more like an owner, not just an educator and somebody that's the best in the field. So it just kind of changing your mindset and really just growing your company and being a team leader. And that's, I guess I didn't answer your question about like day to day.
No, that's perfect. I mean, that was dead nuts. I couldn't ask for a better answer. It was candid.
Yeah.
It was funny because I don't know, we didn't pre-rehearse this, but like you're literally leading me into my last question I wanted to ask you. Is there a certain book or 2 or 3 that you would recommend? Interesting enough, like when I met Jonathan Potoshnik of the Lawn Care Millionaire, co-founder of Service Autopilot, and we did the elite methodology as well. Right after I met him, like these guys started introducing me to like certain books, and I don't think my whole college career I actually like went to the library. I actually was very proud of it. Like 5 years of college, I never stepped foot in the college library. Like that's how much I don't like reading. I mean, it was like, I knew I needed to go to college. At least I thought I did. And my parents were very forceful on that part. So I don't just, I'm glad we got the piece of paper, but it's interesting that the influences that changed everything about me was like, read this book, read that book. And it's interesting. I'll text Jonathan occasionally, like, "Hey, what's the latest read? I gotta get on." And I still don't read it. I put it on an audiobook. So
I do audiobook too. I'm gonna try what I heard a lot of people will do is audiobook and the book itself and just follow along. And apparently you process stuff a little bit better. So I'm gonna start trying to do that as well. I would say the first book that I read that was kind of business related, but also personal finances was Rich Dad Poor Dad, and that really like opened up my eyes. And I'm like, I wouldn't relate it too well, but if you're reading your first financial book, Rich Dad Poor Dad was just a good, quick, easy read that wasn't like too complicated. I really liked Elevate a lot. Traction
Elevate is by Tommy Mello.
Yep.
And then Traction is Gino Wickman. So
yep. And then I don't know if I don't know. Can you still hear me?
I can still hear you.
Can you see me?
But I can hear you.
Okay, I'm just gonna go into my audiobook and find 100 Million Offers by Alex Hermosi. Profit First is also a good book.
Great one. Mike Michalowicz. Pumpkin Plan is also a fan favorite by Mike.
And then P for P, also by Mike Andes. That's also a good one if you're going to be doing the pay for performance structure. That was a good read as well.
Yeah,
just kind of informing you on it.
He kind of updates the old school piece rate for P for P. So couldn't agree with you more on that one. Vitaly, dude, I want to congratulate you on your success. Congratulate on the new one along. I think you're doing it right. The work-life balance, from what I can tell, is just spot on. You got really clear on that culture, and really appreciate you trusting, obviously, in Simple Growth myself, but just really want to congratulate you. And this is what it's all about, is just bringing industry leaders, national experts as yourself on here, just providing value. So hopefully everybody watching this found for value. We're going to be on next week again. SG, Simple Growth Weekly Talk Show. Vitaly from Simple Lawns and Landscape Design. Thanks, brother. And we will catch you guys next